Whitebeard was already considered one of the strongest characters in all of One Piece. But what if, during Marineford, he awakened the full power of the Gura Gura no Mi? Just how much stronger would he become? And how drastically would the entire war change? In this universe, the awakening of the Gura Gura no Mi transformed Whitebeard from the strongest man in the world into the strongest being and something that was closer to God himself. In One Piece, Devil Fruit Awakening represents complete control over one's ability to the point where they can even extend their power beyond what the universe even thinks about. This is seen with Luffy and many other characters in the series. But Whitebeard is a bit different because his fruit already held the power to destroy the entire world and shake even some of the strongest people like the Admirals, Garp, and even Sengoku. But his awakening, after happening, would be far more catastrophic than anything the world had ever seen. The moment he was in Marineford, fighting everyone, going through the betrayal, that is where he goes through the awakening. The first sign is a deep vibration that travels through everyone's heartbeat, making the whole air thick and taking everyone's breath away. But what would his awakening even incorporate? It would grant him the ability to generate large-scale shockwaves, meaning the entire landscape would become a quake zone under his control, and he would be the only one responsible for absolute annihilation. Right after he awakened his devil fruit, the plaza beneath him fractured instantly, forming weird patterns that came from the ground. The Marines building began trembling uncontrollably, and the very foundations on which it stood began cracking. Even people like Sakazuki or Mihawk were stunned to see how strong the strongest man had actually become. In the awakened state, Whitebeard's body became surrounded by an aura that made it impossible for anyone to penetrate any attack on him. As soon as Whitebeard awakened this power, Blackbeard was the first one to attack. He came forward with a sword, trying to stab Whitebeard from behind, but his sword broke. With a single shrug, he threw Blackbeard miles away from them. This aura not only amplified his offense, but his durability and defense too. After laughing a little, he started to advance. Each step sent tremors outward, and each breath made the air heavy. His punches that were once brutal were now enough to destroy entire countries. And thanks to his new ability, Whitebeard also became a master of manipulating the environment from within. Instead of striking surfaces to produce his quake, he can now produce seismic force inside the environment and the matter itself. Among some of the most powerful abilities that Whitebeard gained after receiving the Gura Gura no Mi's awakening, the most terrifying was this one. It is called the Spatial Fracture Field. These zones contain broken, vibrating space that can manifest wherever Whitebeard wants them to be. These can act as little containers where reality itself can be destroyed. At first, Kizaru wanted to attack Whitebeard using his lightning fast beams. However, they were refracted unpredictably, and Sakazuki's magma flow melted, and this affected the demeanor of the whole team too. Thanks to the newly awakened powers, Whitebeard became more than just your average pirate captain. He was a force to be reckoned with. Some people started calling him the human volcano, the way he erupted onto the battlefield and started fighting everyone all of a sudden. Many Marine members suffocated to death due to the sheer aura that Whitebeard contained, and some of the more capable ones were having a difficult time just moving through the battlefield. As Whitebeard was discovering his own powers, the first major clash after he awakened his new abilities was between him and the Marines. The Admiral started stepping forward to stop the chaos that was overtaking the Marines and giving the pirates an upper hand. But the crazy part was that each one of them witnessed the destructive force of the Gura Gura no Mi many times throughout the war. However, neither was prepared for what they were about to experience now. Kuzan started reacting first. He wanted to stabilize the battlefield and regain control and dominance over everyone. So first, he jumped into the air and used his Ice Age, wanting to freeze the old man while he was still standing on the fort. He wanted to not only immobilize Whitebeard, but also kill his teammates. As soon as he used his abilities, a huge sheet of ice started consuming the sea and reached toward the plaza. However, the moment it started solidifying, the frozen wave vibrated violently and cracked instantly. Whitebeard easily came out of the ice wall and jumped, punching the air, keeping Kuzan miles away from everyone. Kizaru was the next one to exploit this opportunity. He transformed into light and fired many barrages of beams toward Whitebeard, wanting to pierce through him. The moment Kizaru got close to Whitebeard, the old man punched the ground, picked up a heavy rock, and smashed it into Kizaru's head, knocking him out in an instant. Everyone from the Marines to the pirates at Marineford was stunned to see what this old man was capable of now. He defeated one of the strongest admirals the world had ever seen, and the moment Whitebeard was about to kill Kizaru, Sakazuki walked in. Without a single thought, he used his meteor volcano, firing a massive barrage of magma fists into the air. The whole sky turned red, and the flames were reaching toward Whitebeard. However, Whitebeard was no slouch. He countered by releasing many small vacuum spheres that compressed the magma balls into small parts, and he redirected those balls using his hand gestures towards the Marines, killing dozens of men. The other Marines that were watching from afar realized that Sakazuki's strongest range assault was nothing more than child's play for Whitebeard to control, and now this power was something that Marines Marines were actually fearing. But even if the other admirals were on the brink of defeat, Sakazuki closed in, refusing to accept defeat. He then used a hellbound dog with his magma-coated fist, ripping through the ground as the molten rock came from all directions. From there, Whitebeard sent a quake pulse through the earth itself, destabilizing the whole magma flow of Sakazuki before it reached him. This is the point where Sakazuki started losing momentum, and the battle then started escalating when he used his ultimate technique, the Great Eruption. Then came the big magma that not only engulfed the entire battlefield, but also started killing both pirates and Marines. Whitebeard was already quite angry, looking at all the destruction that the Marines were causing, and his awakened state allowed him to form a huge quake barrier around his body. He then started laughing in his own fashion and created a huge shield that protected the pirates from the magma that was coming from their side. It was such a beautiful scene. For the first time in war, Whitebeard matched Sakazuki blow for blow without seeing any injury. Rather, he defeated two of the strongest Marines to ever exist, and now Sakazuki, who was also quite strong, was having trouble just keeping up with the old man. Sakazuki then crashed back onto the ground with magma coming from his body. On the other hand, Whitebeard was standing tall in the middle of the ruins, with his awakened state glowing a glorious aura all around his body. While Sakazuki had a lot of difficulty just breathing, Whitebeard was warming up. He wanted Sakazuki to play all his cards so they could both start fighting at a level that the world hasn't seen before. In the real Marineford arc, the results were pretty different. The admirals had complete control over the pirates, and even Ace was dead relatively quickly. The only orderly plaza that the Marines had became a fractured wasteland of shattered stones, destroyed craters, and air that was vibrating from the sheer pressure that Whitebeard had. His new power continued to pulse outward, creating an atmosphere that made standing feel like it was working out. But now Sakazuki came back from the rubble, with magma spilling everywhere and him having a very angry look on his face. Instead of seeing Whitebeard's awakening as something that would terrify him, even though he was terrified, he didn't stop fighting. That just showed the dedication that he had. Sakazuki wanted justice, and he wanted to absolutely destroy Whitebeard. Then, the two titans started closing the distance quickly, and the clash became the turning point of the entire war. First, they began fighting each other in hand-to-hand combat. With obviousness, we know that Whitebeard absolutely annihilated Sakazuki in that stand-up. Then Whitebeard revealed another technique called the Quick Burst Step. With a speed that was so fast, it made even Kizaru look like the slowest opponent. He burst forward towards Sakazuki. This sent shockwaves rippling through the ground, causing the ground to erupt and be destroyed at the same time. Here, Sakazuki braced, but the impact of the Bisento strike was so powerful that he went from standing on the ground to going on the execution platform. Sakazuki then skated backward with magma flaring violently as he tried to wake himself up. He recovered relatively quickly, but everyone saw the brutal attacks that he was going through and how it was taking a big toll on his body. Sakazuki then screamed. This was something he couldn't do before, and this was the only power that saved all the pirates. All the pirates and the Marines started moving away, and in the middle of Marineford, there were only two men standing, Whitebeard and Sakazuki. Sakazuki became desperate, and he told Whitebeard that if he didn't let them execute Ace, he would use the ultimate magma to kill everyone, including himself. And as soon as he did that, Whitebeard then manifested the Quake Guard, which was a huge sphere of vibrating air that formed around him and the pirates individually. Many Marines lost their lives thanks to the magma that Sakazuki unleashed. Suddenly, volcanic fountains were overflowing with liquid fire coming into the battlefield. Kuzan came in and protected everyone by using his Ice Age, stopping the molten lava from killing everyone. But then, Sakazuki refused to fall. He transformed into a huge figure of molten fury with his magma that was so intense, it started melting everyone's clothes away. This attack was against the Quake Guard, wanting to melt Whitebeard's strongest defense. However, Whitebeard dismissed this guard entirely and dashed forward, ignoring the heat as the Quake aura around his body flickered and distorted the flame and rejected the flames themselves. In this fury, Whitebeard not only drove forward, but also right into Sakazuki, but just inches away from his body. He then compressed a small systemic blast that traveled into Sakazuki's molten chest. But this attack was different as it spread all over Sakazuki's body. This destabilized the structure and caused Sakazuki to come back into his normal form and neutralize his whole devil fruit. This was the moment Sakazuki realized that he wasn't fighting his usual enemy. It was the reincarnation of God himself. Without these powers, Sakazuki was like a regular Marine. All the admirals started moving towards Sakazuki, but it was already too late. Whitebeard then picked up his Bisento and smashed it on Sakazuki's head. In a few moments, the Marines lost one of their biggest assets, the man who was more loyal to them than even the elders, and someone who devoted his entire life to killing pirates. Seeing this, the others were quite surprised and lost their will to fight. Kizaru and Kuzan had just lost their ally, even if they weren't the best of friends. They came forward to Whitebeard, but on one hand, Mihawk drove away Kuzan while Marco took Kizaru away. But then, the tide of the battle changed as Blackbeard came running back at Marineford, but for the worst possible time because Whitebeard was already well versed with his new abilities. Deep fissures engulfed the plaza, and there were towers leaning at an impossible angle. The sea was very violent, and there was chaos everywhere. The remaining admirals were just scattered, struggling to stabilize their position on the island. Luffy and everyone were also fighting their own battles, while Whitebeard was standing in the corner corner, knowing that he could kill every one of the enemies without a second thought. Blackbeard came back with confidence, and he saw the weakened state of the battlefield. Just like the original storyline, he thought Whitebeard was also in a weakened state, since he had one of the biggest battles of his time. His pirates came forward with all of them quite eager to display their abilities. Moreover, Blackbeard also secured many new members from Impel Down. However, the instant that they stepped onto the fractured plaza, the ground started vibrating with such intensity that even Blackbeard got scared. The air was even different than the last time Blackbeard started fighting the old man. He saw that there was this weird space around Whitebeard that bent like glass. One of Blackbeard's crew members started attacking Whitebeard, but as soon as he got close to Whitebeard, he was decimated into nothingness. Teach got angry and made his move instantly. He activated the Yami Yami no Mi, forming a sphere of darkness that spread across the entire battlefield. He told Whitebeard that in this sphere, even gods fail, and now that he has many new abilities, this old man wouldn't be able to stop him at all. Suddenly, into the void, Blackbeard started pulling debris, light, and even parts that were shattered outside, all in, and redirected them toward Whitebeard. His plan was to swallow Whitebeard's quake aura into darkness, weaken him, and then steal his abilities. But he realized too late that this energy didn't behave like normal matter. The darkness could consume physical debris, but something like a vibration was way out of his control because those shifting waves refused to be drawn in. During this whole process, Whitebeard was standing, looking at Teach with his folded arms. He told Blackbeard that betrayal was not something he taught to his crew and that now he must die. The clash between darkness and light energy destabilized the field. The ground beneath Blackbeard collapsed as the dark sphere became affected by Whitebeard's seismic vibration. It was acting as a counter to the Yami Yami's abilities, but Teach was way too much in his own head to think logically like that. Blackbeard then tried to stabilize the field using his ability called Liberation, pulling debris back toward Whitebeard in massive chunks. However, the awakened quake aura shattered every single piece that Blackbeard redirected toward Whitebeard. The stones, steel, wood, and anything that he pulled inside got turned into dust in mere seconds. Here, Blackbeard realized that brute force wouldn't work, so he jumped forward, attempting to grab Whitebeard directly, aiming to nullify his devil fruit abilities through physical contact. And instead of going backward, Whitebeard stepped forward. That surprised even Blackbeard, but he started smiling. Whitebeard used Quake Burst Step to close the distance faster than Blackbeard could even grab him, and this pressure blast shook the entire plaza, putting Whitebeard into striking range. However, before Blackbeard could even react, Whitebeard put a quick-coated fist and slammed it into Blackbeard's chest. It didn't cause any outward damage, but instead, it was a very carefully placed internal rupture quake that was specifically targeted at any Devil Fruit user. Blackbeard's Devil Fruit was the one that got nullified, and the darkness inside Blackbeard's body reacted violently. Instead of attacking Whitebeard, it imploded from within, killing Teach completely, and for the final time. He became a symbol of what Whitebeard was capable of. Not only could Whitebeard destroy the very essence of life force, but also nullify the Devil Fruit user's powers from deep within. This is what the old man was capable of. After Blackbeard's crew saw their hero getting absolutely annihilated, they went forward. Burgess charged with brute strength, only to be swept aside by the shockwave of Whitebeard's haki. Shiryu came to strike with strength, but found himself in a bubble that he couldn't escape from. Whitebeard then stomped him to death. Then, Van Augur's bullets warped midair, curving harmlessly around Whitebeard thanks to the spatial vibrations that he possessed. Then came Lafitte, who tried hypnotizing Whitebeard, but everything collapsed when the vibrations changed his balance and concentration. With that, Blackbeard's pirate chapter was over, and there was no more of him left. Whitebeard shouted in pride, "Is there anyone who can match my level?" To his surprise, there actually was. Suddenly, the skies above Marineford started to tear apart as a massive dragon came out of the sun. Marines froze, pirates fell silent, and even Garp looked at it, realizing who it actually was. Whitebeard's quakes, which were once dominating the battlefield, looked silent for a brief moment. Kaido just arrived on the battlefield. He crashed through the cloud using his Azure Dragon form, coming downward with a speed that was so thunderous that it froze everyone in the war. However, the beast pirates remained offshore, horrified by Kaido and the destruction that he was about to do. He looked at Whitebeard and was happy to see that his old ally was at full power. He told the old man that they would handle it once and for all. So without waiting for a response, Kaido unleashed the Bolo Breath that was so massive, it not only split the entire sea, but it cut the whole Marineford in half. The whole island was now split, and on one side, everyone else was fighting, and on the other, Kaido and Whitebeard were going head to head. Without being anxious, Whitebeard stepped forward, was calm as ever, and thrust his massive hand into the air. Suddenly, a seismic pressure wall erupted before him, a barrier of distorted space, a shockwave so powerful it took away the smirk Kaido once had. But then, realizing that Whitebeard could fight at his prime, his eyes widened with excitement, and he told Whitebeard that he should show him more. He came down to the ground, transforming quickly into his hybrid form, knowing that the old man would absolutely annihilate his dragon form. Then his scales got hardened, his muscles got bigger, and his eyes were glowing fully clearly with bloodlust. Suddenly, he dashed forward with his Thunder Bagua that was coated heavily with his advanced Conqueror's Haki. Whitebeard wasn't using any kind of Haki here, but he swung his Basento towards the attack, which overpowered Whitebeard for the very first time. Black lightning exploded from everywhere, and the sky suddenly got dark. With the next Thunder Bagua strike, the strategy that Whitebeard had was a little bit different. This time, he had his Basento wrapped up in the armament Haki, but underneath that, there was also a core of awakened Quake energy that was beating heavily. The two attacks collided, and everyone else on the other side of the island was stunned to see the sheer amount of aura that they both possessed. Admirals, commanders, vice admirals, and even pirates themselves were worried about their lives. Now, Kaido jumped forward towards Whitebeard, trying to hit him with his weapon. However, Whitebeard stopped it with his sheer hands and threw Kaido away. But Kaido was loving it, and he told Whitebeard that he had actually become stronger from the last time that they met. He then leaped into the air once and transformed back into his dragon form, spiraling around Whitebeard from there. Kaido rained down many attacks like Dragon Fire, Dragon Breath, tornadoes, flame clouds, and everything that was basically destroying the entire island. To protect himself, Whitebeard then used a huge seismic tide that went outward. It was a newly awakened technique that turned the entire surface of the Marineford into an unstable structure. This made all the rubble go from the ground to the sky, hitting Kaido in places that he never even expected. This threw him off balance mid-flight. However, before he could get his balance back, Whitebeard was already above in the air with a Basento in his hand. He slammed it on Kaido's head, bringing him to the ground. However, the blade didn't cut Kaido. It crushed his skull. The dragon's scales started to crack, and an ocean of blood came from Kaido's mouth. Then he came back to his hybrid form, with blood dripping everywhere. For the first time in decades, the strongest being in the world fell. This whole battle was rather symbolic, because on one hand, we had the strongest man alive, and on the other, we had the strongest creature alive. Whitebeard then tightened his grip on his weapon. His Conqueror's Haki was flaring faster, with dark lightning appearing all around him, while also complementing the aura of his Devil Fruit. Kaido got angrier and charged forward. Their Haki slammed together again and again, each sending huge impacts to the whole island of Marineford. To try out his luck against Whitebeard, Kaido swung his Thunder Bagua, but Whitebeard crushed it this time with his Quake. Kaido started biting Whitebeard with his Dragon Jaws. However, Whitebeard was super strong here, and he tore them apart with his hands. In the last act of their battle, Whitebeard grabbed Kaido by his horns, pulling him close and pressing a Quake Sphere directly into his mouth. This made sure that Kaido's head imploded, and there was nothing left anymore. The world's strongest creature collapsed, dying in the most gruesome way possible. On the other hand, Whitebeard was standing above him, breathing heavily, with his powers actually increasing with time. Marineford had already become a wasteland, and the strongest man proved it once more. With that final shockwave, Kaido's corpse hit the ground and went into the ocean. But as soon as Whitebeard was stabilizing himself, another entity came into this battle. This time, the power was so overwhelming that it momentarily froze the whole battlefield. It was Shanks, whose ship cut across the ruined harbor, and before it would even anchor, a huge burst of the Supreme Conqueror's Haki would make all the weak fighters sleep. This stunned Marines and pirates alike. Many collapsed instantly. Even veterans like Kuzan, Kizaru, Garp, and Sengoku were forced back by the sheer intensity of the Haki that Shanks possessed. Their bodies froze, and the remaining warlords were stunned to see someone like Shanks joining the battle. In this battle, Shanks didn't negotiate at all. Rather, he leaped from the bows of his ship, landing amongst the debris using his amazing physical conditioning. Shanks had only one mission, and it was to save Ace. This time, Ace was fighting against Kizaru, and as soon as Kizaru was about to get through Ace, Shanks saved him by kicking the lightning flash right into his face. In this timeline, Shanks was actually really angry. He went through the falling rubble using advanced armament Haki that was coated on his blade and his limbs. This allowed him to slice through the shattered building, frozen seawaters, and everything that had been happening here. That's where Whitebeard met Shanks. Both smiled at each other, and Whitebeard told Shanks that Ace was still not dead. Suddenly, Sengoku jumped towards Whitebeard while he was distracted and transformed into his huge Daibutsu form. Then, golden shockwaves were rising like sunfire, and Sengoku, who was the current in charge of the Marines, the main man himself, was fighting the strongest man alive. Shanks, on the other hand, crashed into the execution platform, ripping apart barriers of ice and magma scoured metal. The Marines began to fold, unable to withstand the spiritual pressure of the warlord. And then he tore through the remaining obstacles and reached Ace. Shanks grabbed him while shielding him with Conqueror's Haki and then carried him off the platform. On their way, they had to face many enemies, but Shanks was going crazy while cutting through the collapsing wall of debris with a single coded strike. The Marines wanted to retaliate, but they couldn't even aim. The sheer pressure of Shanks' presence forced them to be on their knees. From there, he delivered Ace to his crew at the harbor's edge before turning back towards the center of the battlefield. By now, Whitebeard and Sengoku were already fully engaged with each other. They were tearing through the battlefield like it was Play-Doh. Whitebeard endured each blast. Sengoku hurled at him with his aura, and the awakened quake field around his body destabilized the golden shockwaves themselves. Their battle was going on, but Sengoku summoned a final massive wave of the Buddha's shock energy. However, Whitebeard stomped the ground and released a special fractal that broke the golden beam apart in the air. With his path cleared, he jumped forward using using his speed, which was impossible for anyone on the battlefield. Using his quake-coated fist, he slammed Sengoku into the ground, knocking him out. There, the golden form shattered, the Buddha disappeared, and Sengoku, who was once known as one of the strongest men ever and the leader of the Marines, was already sleeping on the ground. On the other hand, Shanks was watching from a distance, knowing that Whitebeard would not only survive the day, but also make a name for himself. This was due to the overwhelming new abilities he had. On the other hand, Shanks was also fighting against Kuzan and Kizaru. For the most part, and with the help of Marco, both were overpowering the Marines and ultimately defeated the two admirals. However, now came one big battle that everyone was curious about. It was Garp versus Whitebeard. At this point, Marineford became a wasteland. There were molten lava craters everywhere, collapsed towers, and earth that had been destroyed. The bodies of pirates and Marines were hanging everywhere, from on top of the rubble to the ground beneath. The world saw only extreme violence. The admirals had fallen back, and Shanks had taken ace and gone away. The only figures that were standing in the middle of Marineford were none other than Whitebeard and the last man that Marines could rely on, Garp. Garp told Whitebeard that enough was enough, and he stepped forward with his fist clenched. Every single attack by Garp's armament hockey was like a tough cannon launching at you. While his age chipped away at his peak, the spirit that he had and the loyalty to his Marine fellows remained. Whitebeard's fruit powers flickered erratically now. The awakening was still there, but thanks to the unlimited battles that he had, his prime was also going away. He had killed so many people in a few hours. Blackbeard, Sakazuki, and even Kaido, who couldn't be killed in the first place. Whitebeard already proved to everyone that he was the strongest thing alive on Earth. Every time Garp would attack him head-on, Whitebeard would lunge backward. His strategy changed, but then Garp launched with explosive speed with his fist coated in a lifetime's worth of armament hockey mastery. This punch landed against the Quake Sphere, destroying the air around them. The shock of the collision this time made the Quake shatter, and Whitebeard got a clean hit for the very first time in this battle. However, Whitebeard countered by slamming his massive fists into the air, forming seismic domes that exploded as soon as they were around Garp. Garp was stunned to see that this old man had so many tricks up his sleeve. But then he moved forward, twisting his body, and aimed a huge punch at Whitebeard's skull. Whitebeard countered with another quake that stopped Garp from landing cleanly on him. Marco came to help Whitebeard, but he told him to get lost. Blood was dripping from Whitebeard's chin after getting cracked due to Garp's abilities. Garp's expressions were hardening on the other hand. He understood that as much as he hated to do this, he must do it. Then he surged forward with every single thing that he had. Fists coated in armament and Conqueror's hockey, while Whitebeard raised his Pacento. But ultimately, Garp went through his guard, putting a massive hole in the badass old man's chest, ultimately killing him. Still, he refused to fall. Whitebeard released one final quake burst that sent Garp flying into the remains of the battleship, putting him to sleep as well. But the attack drained Whitebeard's only chance of survival, and with such a huge hole in his chest, even he couldn't survive. His body locked and the muscles relaxed. The tremors that were almost like music to the Allies also disappeared. Whitebeard stood tall, unmoving, with his body refusing to kneel even in death. The final blow had already been delivered. The aftermath of the battle included many casualties, but in the end, the Marines lost their biggest line of defense while Ace was saved. Make sure to smash the like button and subscribe for more One Piece videos.